Kristen, thank you so much for being on board the transatlantic. What a gift from you. I know that you're super busy and but I couldn't miss on the opportunity to have you on board the transatlantic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh my God, your energy is like exudes out of the screen.
That's
it's awesome.
Kind of energy. Okay, look, as you know, we think that everybody's an ocean of erratic thoughts and wild feelings. I'm sure your ocean is amazing and fascinating. I'm very excited about across the ocean. So I would say, let's go to it. The 7 questions like the 7 C's, and I go with the first one, okay?
Okay.
Good. She didn't do it because she wanted to prove a point to the world. She just did it because she wanted to prove a point to herself. This statement describes the gigantic accomplishments of Anne Debson, the first woman to have crossed the Atlantic by boat. She departed from England on a 23-foot wooden sailboat with the spirit of a warrior. We get into advertising with the same spirits. We need the spirits, otherwise we will be crushed by this industry. Most of what we do is to prove a point to ourselves. The most common point we want to prove is like we aren't quit to it. We don't quit easily. We go through a lot of rejection, but we stay there. So here's our first question. Why did you get into advertising? Were you trying to prove a point to yourself? Or was there no point to prove it? You just bump into it. It was your destiny.
It's much more the latter. I had never taken a class in advertising, had never even considered a career in advertising. I couldn't get a job at a real company. And so I networked my way into an ad agency. But I will say, I felt from the very beginning like I hit the job lottery. I felt like the minute I got into my first ad agency that all the synapses in my brain were going off. It was just high energy. I'm an Army brat. My parents moved a lot growing up. And so I tend to have a lot of learned curiosity. Maybe it's innate, but it's definitely been learned. And a willingness to try new things. And I have always worried, my biggest fear is boredom. And so I've always worried that if I picked one career, would that sustain me? Would it satiate me for a long time? And, you know, given that my dad was military, he spent his whole career, 20 years of his life in that. And then the second 20 years in defense contracting. So similar. So I had this idea in my head that I was going to spend a long time. I think now when I look at my kids, they've unburdened themselves of that responsibility. They think they can have 7 to 10 careers in their lifetime. I didn't think that I would do that, but I was caught in this tension of thinking, I don't love any one thing enough to dedicate my whole work life to it. And when I fell into advertising, I felt like I had this secret where I was like, oh my God, I don't have to dedicate my life to knowing any one thing. I can learn all these different things all the time in succession or simultaneous. I get to be around amazingly other curious, well-traveled, well-read, interesting people. We get to make things for a living. We get to see the fruit of our labor. I'm an impatient person, and so seeing the fruit of my labor is important. I'm one of those kind of people, like I don't plant bulbs in my garden. I don't really garden either, but when I do plant things, I buy flowers that are already blooming and I plant them. I just repot them. And I think, so I think advertising gives you that too, right? You get to see in relatively short time whether or not an idea you've had works. Right. And I've always felt like that was a gift.
It's funny because this is so refreshing to hear someone that appreciates advertising and the work that we do, because most of the time we that work in advertising, we always like to complain and and blame the type of work we do, and we are not good enough, but it's true. I mean, it's that type of field that allow you to learn so many things at the same time. So even though the future is gonna be, as your your daughter says, it's gonna be 7, 8 careers at the same times. Right. I think we had the opportunity. Even a few years ago, you do have the opportunity to learn so many things that feels like you had 7, 8
right.
careers. So
right.
that's great. And it's a good observation coming from a CEO of a company. I think like it's really like refreshing. Okay. Second question.
Okay.
Until the invention of an accurate sea clock by carpenter clockmaker John Harrison in the 18th century, there was no reliable technique to measure a ship's longitude, its east or west position at the sea, especially when the ship's navigator could not see landmarks or celestial markers due to the weather. So if one were to pop the question, where on earth are you? It would have sounded totally legit. Nowadays, longitude and latitude help us chart our position on earth. Now, imagine replacing longitude and latitude with the two things in your life that count the most and that define who you are, not just where you are on this planet. What would they be?
Mm. It's interesting because this question brings so many things to my mind at once. I'm a huge Ernest Shackleton fan. In fact, I just gave the book Endurance to our whole staff at Christmas, and I just reread it myself, and they had to navigate by the stars in order to, basically a rowboat, in order to get to the island that saves them. So I can picture the celestial things. It's funny because you phrased it two ways. One was the two things that matter the most. And then the second part was the two things that define you.
Right.
I'm going to kind of lean towards the latter. One of the things that was really defining for me, and I think from a career but life perspective, was when I became a single parent. It was a moment in my life that was unexpected and not how I'd imagined my life to go. And yet I didn't have the luxury of self-doubt or wasting a lot of time trying to figure it out. Like, you know, you're a parent, you just have to, the job is there every day for you to do, and you can't really opt out for a period of time. It's not like I could go backpacking and go find myself. Like I had to own, I had to hold myself accountable, and for not only my own happiness, but someone else and their happiness. I needed to own my choices. I needed to make decisions every day with the best information I had on that day. And then give myself the freedom or the grace to change my mind or pivot later. And when I thought about last year managing in COVID, there are so many muscles that I earned in that first 2 years of single parenting. When my son was quite little, 18 months or 3 months old, actually, when I first became a single parent. He was 18 months old when I moved to Martin. But it was a lot of the same muscles I used now. I really believe that I developed a, not like this confidence that says everything I do is right, but I learned how to trust my gut. And I learned the need to keep moving and the need not to wallow or to get paralyzed. And those things all were muscles that I used last year in COVID very much. So that would be a latitude. And longitude, from a work perspective, from a personal life perspective, I would say is faith. But from the idea of just believing in something I cannot see and believing there's a purpose in life that's bigger than I might be aware of or imagine. But from a work perspective, I would also say there was a moment when I had been at Martin for about 13 years, and it's primarily the only agency in town. And I'm a parent and want, my kids to know their dad. And I didn't feel like I could move, but I also knew I wasn't moving up in the company. And I had to reconcile my own ambition with my own place in life and not feel resentment and still feel excited and energized every day to go to work. And Mullen, the first agency that I ever worked with, came and offered me a job to come back, but said I could live here. and I could commute. And I said, oh, I don't want to commute. I like my kids. And they said, what if we could come up with a lifestyle that afforded us the ability to have you, but you the ability to stay home 5 nights a week? And at the time, this was in 2011, there weren't a lot of people, especially women, doing that. And I had to trust them that they were going to honor their word. And I had to bet on myself that I could make the kind of impact I wanted on a company while I wasn't physically present every day, and make the kind of impact that I wanted to as a mother when I wasn't always going to be present every single day. And both of them required that I bet on myself, but that I also bet on people around me, that it was a village, and that I had to recognize my own inability to do everything. So it was a humbling and empowering moment at the exact same time. And I think it changed the way I manage people. It changed the way I pick the people closest to me in my life. My kids totally stepped up. The people that I partnered with at Mullen totally honored their promise. And I held that job from CSO to president for over 8 years, never living there. And we grew the company fourfold. And then I came back to Martin, where I still live. And so, but again, I learned that I could rewrite the rules. And I learned, importantly, that people would rewrite the rules for me. And that was valuable, not because I thought I was special, but because I think that when you're honest with your bosses about what you can do and what you're capable of, but also what you're not capable of, I think they'll more than meet you halfway. And I just assumed, I've never seen anyone do this before, therefore it can't happen for me, it wouldn't have happened. But we rewrote the rules together. And then because of that, I think I've rewritten the rules for people who've come after me. So Elizabeth Paul, she came and was the CSO of Mullen after me. She lived in Richmond and commuted up there and took that job when I came back here. And we've allowed that for other amazing women in our lives. So it's something we've passed on and passed down. And I think we've all found that we can bring our full selves to work better because we were flexible about the rules.
I love this because it's a positive signal to women in the industry, to everybody in the industry, because for too often, we feel that's we are alone with our struggles, and it's so hard sometimes now, during the pandemic, it's even harder. And what those companies were able to do for you, to rewrite the rule for you while you were rewriting the rules, is something that gives hope, and it happened. Right. And I think that's what I like about this. Again, it's the positive message, because it's very easy to fall into the negative space. It's very easy to say to yourself, if it's not there, it means that it's not there. But just yesterday I was listening to one of the songs of Linkin Park, One More Night. There is one line in the song that say, if it's not there, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And it just struck me, the line. I don't know. I always whenever I listen to this song, I always make sure that my mind goes onto that line, really and embrace the line. I feel you talk about faith, and you talk about work, and these are the longitude, the latitude of a person that's went through a complete journey and learned from that. And that is why I'm doing transatlantic crossing, the ocean, because I want younger generation, but everybody, honestly, adding the younger generation to understand that there are good people out there, that they are ready to help you if you allow them to help you.
There are. And importantly, everyone's going to have, using your sea metaphor, there's always going to be a storm.
Always.
My life has not been impervious to bad things happening or me making bad choices. But it doesn't mean that there aren't people who are right around to help you, or that there aren't opportunities to change things or move things forward. Right. If you follow your values and keep moving, and just don't lose hope.
Absolutely. This is good. Third question. 200 million years ago, the world map saw all the continents assembled in like the supercontinent of Pangaea. The continents have been shifting farther apart since then. But give the Earth a few hundred million years, and the continent will probably reemerge as one giant continent. One proposed name for that possible future reunion is Pangaea Proxima. To spread apart and to come close together seems to be the evolution mode of Earth, but also of companies in advertising. In the beginning, there were a few holding companies. The agency popped up everywhere. Then they merged. Then they came apart. It's literally like a mode that is very common in advertising. So my question for you is like, what do you think the future of advertising will look like in 100 years from now? I won't be here. I wish I was.
These are such thoughtful questions, honestly. Like, kudos to you. I've literally never had questions like this in a podcast. I think that if you define advertising as the ability to persuade people of a point of view, then I think advertising has existed through all of time.
Right.
Sermon on the Mount, I mean, the Romans, everything. It's always been there. I think if you define advertising as the making of a TV commercial or the making of a print ad, then I think those things will change dramatically. Specifically for America, I think that we are a commerce-driven country. We are a country that is in this, commerce-driven, way. And so I think I do not see that advertising itself is in threat. I think what would be in threat is if we clung to the manifestations of what we make and define that as advertising, then we run the risk of being outdated. But I don't think there's ever a need to not persuade people of a point of view. I think lawyers do it. I think politicians do it. I think companies do it.
Do you think there's going to be a time where holding company, they're going to crumble again and then like coming back again together? Because what I've been seeing the past like 2 years is like a lot of like big company merged, like, drug with Accenture and like, or some of there is like so many different like little company coming up now. So
probably.
Yeah.
It ebbs and flows, right? Things break up and then they they create other smaller groups. I think what is at risk is, when you think about the agencies that are either getting merged or dying, and some of them very sad, that are really struggling and things that, 5 years ago we would not have predicted. I think that it just reminds me constantly that we have to drink our own Kool-Aid. We have to treat ourselves like a brand. We have to treat ourselves the same way. We have to take the advice we would give to our clients, which is don't try to be everything to everyone. Have a point of view. Have a set of values that, that guide you. Recruit people who believe what you believe. And I think sometimes we start to think of ourselves as a company with 401k plans and things like that. And so then we lose sight of the things that define us. We lose sight of our brand and we forget that we are a brand. And I think when that happens, those agencies get merged because then they're just two things that look similar on a balance sheet and someone higher up says, oh, these things are exactly the same. I'm just going to slap them together. And that's a failure on the agency's part to convince the world that they are not like everybody else. We have a responsibility to say, I'm different. This agency is a different agency than the other 3 or 4 agencies that we compete with, not just because the script we write or the Snapchat filter we create is different, but because what we believe is different and the way we approach problem solving is different and the ways we believe brands grow is different and the way we solve problems is different.
Yeah,
and that we have to hold to.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like, to have a point of view of differentiation, like, I think like, to have a unique selling proposition, to put it like, in advertising term, is really like something that's like big companies should think about. and what you say about like, you know, we should start drinking our own Kool-Aid and like start treating ourselves as a brand. And like, you know, the same thing that we recommend for the clients is something that we should do ourselves. It's very important because we don't do it. And actually, I stretch it that far to even say that even like individual that work in advertising, creatives and planner and like a project manager, everybody should feel that they are their own brand as well.
Mhm.
In this way, they should like kind of like invest more in themselves. Like, you know, it's a very interesting topic. It's like, you know, it could be like, you know, uh, analyzed like longer, but
It's funny too, because I think agencies' biggest fear is that if they define themselves too distinctly, that the phone won't ring.
right.
Because so there'll be a new business pitch and somebody will think, oh, that agency's not right. But everything we know about brands is that when you define yourself and you radiate that energy, it makes people want to be a part of that brand. I worked on Volkswagen Drivers Wanted years ago, and you know, we drew a line in the sand that said there are drivers and there are passengers on the road of life, drivers wanted. It didn't leave people thinking, gosh, I really just want to be a passenger in life. Of course, when you build it and have that energy radiate, people think, oh, I want to be a part of that. So it shouldn't limit you. It should actually draw more of the right talent and clients towards you and increase your odds of winning. So you don't need to pitch as often because you're not running around chasing a lot of the wrong things. But it's funny, I think agencies often roll their eyes at clients because they think, oh, clients aren't brave enough, when in fact, when you turn the mirror back on yourself, sometimes you're not brave enough either.
Absolutely. Oh, you're so right on that. It's true. But you know, it's very philosophical as well. You know, it's I think you say it's like also like it's a mode that change continuously. I give you like this is a parallel. It may feel very strange, but you know, when I was very young, like as a side hustle, when I was in Rome growing up, like you know, I work as a model, so like as a fashion model. So one of the things that back in the 90s they used to tell you is like you, and when you are like, you know, go around showing your pictures, like they want you to look like everybody else because they want you like, for instance, to have like a neutral haircut, to have like the standard like, you know, sides, because they want you like how do you say, adjust it as their need. So they don't want it to be like too agey, like, you know.
Okay.
But now in the past 10 years, fashion has changed. So now if you look like at the models and the aesthetics, it's completely shifted. Right now they're looking for
Right.
a point of view. They're looking for something that has more of an age. And I
Yes.
think that's like, you know, on the surface, that's just one parallel. But it happened like in every fields of life where, you know, we are told constantly, like even us as a creative, I remember when I came into the industry, one of the things that a few creative directors told me was like, do not have a style. Your style is the agency style. Your style is the client style. And I was the opposite, because my writing is my style, because it comes from me. It comes from my flesh and bone.
Sure.
I can't like, you know, and even the same, again, I'm just like, you know, thinking out loud about what you say, but, you know, Hunter Thompson, when he created like Gonzo journalism, he did that exactly the same. Like journalism is a field where they tell you, do not express your point of view, right? You just like report the fact as they are. You are neutral, right? But he did the opposite. He changed the rule and he created Gonzo journalism. It was like a first person, like documentary style.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're totally
And
right.
people sought him out for that.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, good talking. For question, be ready to leave the ocean and embark on an extraterrestrial journey, because this is where this question is going.
Okay.
Never doubt myself till I met a computer with a sense of humor. The person who says this sentence is Melanie, the protagonist of a science fiction novel, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, by Robert Heinlein. The novel recounts the event that took place on the moon by a group of people called loonies during a lunar colony's revolt against Earth. The co-protagonist of the novel is Mike, a computer with a dark sense of humor. Computers and artificial intelligence are embedded into our lives like YouTube links. If you were given the chance to transfer one of the qualities from humankind to a computer, what would that be?
I mean, I'm literally laughing. So I'm like, how do you come up with these things? Like,
No,
honestly,
I feel like
I want to reverse engineer this question for a second and be like,
well,
do you just have a list of questions?
no,
I mean, you have.
it's a book that I read. Like I'm an avid reader. I read like shit ton of stuff, but also like I'm generally like, you know, I love asking questions. I don't know why. By the way, I thought that you were laughing because, you know, sometimes when I rewatch myself in the recording, my accent is so bad. And so
No, I just love the creativity of the question. And I'm a huge sci-fi fan. So, but I have not read this book. So I'm going to have to go, read it.
It's a good book.
Okay. So here's the quality that I think I would, and I'm a huge Isaac Asimov fan. So sadly, I've probably put some thought already into the whole idea of robots and AI and qualities transferring. One thing that I think would be interesting, you know, it's funny, anything you take to an extreme would be a negative, right? So if you introduce fear, then you end up with war games, right? So, but here's the thing I would introduce. I would teach them how to forget. Because I do think, like childbirth, sometimes forgetting things enables us to be happy and to lead life with optimism. You know, you can forget kind of the daily insults or the things that maybe were not maliciously intended, but that kind of stung, and it enables you to kind of move on and not be heavily burdened by the rudeness and the incivility of the world. But there was a study actually done in, like, I think 2014, where they gave different groups of people a challenge. And so they gave one group of people like a household item, let's say it was like a newspaper. Right. And they'd say, okay, here are 4 uses for the newspaper. You know, you can make a fire with it, you can get warm with it, you can paper mache it, and you can read it, whatever. And they had that group of people study and memorize the 4 uses. And they gave and then they have another group of people that they did not predetermine this usage for. Then they asked both groups of people for 1 minute, think as many new uses for a newspaper as you can think of. The group that was not burdened to memorize or think about the list in advance came up with more inventive uses for newspaper. The people that had thought about those uses had a harder time letting go of those things in order to think up new things. So they actually found that forgetting or not knowing is a key to creativity. Absolutely. That when your mind is more blank and open, and you don't bring with you all of your preconceptions and all of your encyclopedia knowledge of a product or a brand, you are able to more freely imagine what something could be. And so but I have to imagine a robot or AI never forgets anything. I mean, they're a computer, right? And so they are constantly categorizing and listing and filing. And I would build in there the ability to forget.
What a great answer, honestly. I mean, very brilliant, like, you know, analysis of a computer work, but also like in life, because it's true, like, you know, to unlearn and to forget some of the things that you learn, it's paramount. So like, you know, when you look at kids, like, you know, 5, 6 years old, like, you know, their creativity, like, is an explosion because they don't have that many rules, right? Exactly. So it's like, and one of the hardest things to do growing up in life is like, you know, trying to unlearn everything that you learn and trying to go back to the state of childhood where you didn't know anything, right? To the point that there is a quote that goes like, you know, creativity is a continuous fallback onto childhood. But, you know, it's like, this is so interesting because it's true, like, you know, computer remember everything. So like to teach everything how to forget, it will be super
They're burdened by knowledge. Right. We always think that that's the upside.
Yeah.
But I think anything taken to an extreme is a negative, right? So maybe it's their downside.
Good. 5th question. There is this little group of islands called Tristan da Cunha, surrounded by miles and miles and miles of South Atlantic Ocean. The main island is inhabited by about 275 people. They are resident in the island. The island population is made up of 80 families with just 7 surnames, meaning mostly everyone knows everyone. If you were to pledge to be part of this small group and become the 2076 residents, how would you pitch yourself to get in?
Okay. This is so great. I have to tell you, so actually before COVID, I read an article on like CNN.com
Right.
about remote places because I'm a big adventure person. My kids and I have been to all 7 continents. Every year we made a deal that we would have more stamps in our passport than candles on our birthday cake, which requires that we leave the country every year, which we've been doing since my daughter was 6. And so I actually read about this group of islands. So it's so funny that you bring that up. It's I think it's not only very remote, but like I think if I remember correctly, a ship only goes to visit like a handful of times a year. So even if you went, you have to kind of stay for a while. It's a scene for a great horror film, I'm sure, which I'm also a huge scary movie fan. But my first thought is that if I were of childbearing age, I would think that would be an asset, because I have to imagine that they're all probably all a little tired of each other, and maybe someone new would probably be additive. But I'm not of childbearing age, so that's not gonna be my answer. I did read that they have a rodent issue. So yes, apparently one of the ships that came over at some point brought, like mice or rats that were on the ship, and they've now taken over the island, and they've eaten like all these indigenous birds, and they're eating a lot of the eggs, and so they have a limited food supply. So we just signed a new client in Terminix that has 100% guarantee ability to remove rodents. So I would bring someone from Terminix with me. We would solve the rat problem, and I think they'd let me on. They actually have a day, like a festival, where they run out with nets and catch rats, and then they measure them like fish, and the person who has the biggest rat wins a prize.
Gosh,
like that's
like I'm not saying anything to your creative group, but your answer is a freaking documentary. You had to do it. Now you, with your new clients, so you had to literally
I think it can be a brand activation that can draw a lot of attention to Terminix. I agree. I'm gonna talk to him about it.
Okay, man. Well, look, I see the shore. 6th question. The Rubicon is an art installation at the bottom of the sea. It is an underwater sculpture located in Lanzarote, in Spain. It features 35 statues portrayed as they walk towards a gateway. The artwork symbolizes a point of no return, a warning to humanity that runaway climate change could leave us with no way back to a stable climate. Now, as a CEO of one of the most renowned agencies in the country, do you foresee a point in no return in advertising? In other words, is there any issue out there that if it's not addressed now, it won't be addressed later? There's a point of no return.
With the ad industry?
Yeah.
Meaning a point where if we don't change something, we won't return?
Yes.
Again, if I go to the broader definition of advertising, then no, because I think that at the heart of advertising is essentially the ability to persuade someone else to back your judgment with their money.
Right.
It's a persuasion thing. Different people pay you to persuade people of different things, and you can choose to say no or yes if you believe that there's merit or no merit in what someone's paying you to persuade. And I think sometimes as an agency, as an industry, we forget we can say no. And I actually think we should say no more often. Mm-hmm. There's a perception that ad agencies can be paid to persuade anyone of anything. And that's what gives us such low rankings, I think, in the trust barometers. And it's why people don't join the industry. But I rarely actually find that people do things like that. Mm-hmm. And I do think, though, we need to be reminded that we should exercise our ability to say no more often. Mm. I don't think advertising as a industry will go away. I do think the way we get paid needs to change, though. Or I think that really great, talented people may not choose this industry because they can get paid better somewhere else.
And
We
that's
have
that's
this,
a point of no return. You're totally right.
yeah,
That's exactly my question. So the way we get paid,
the
we
way we
need
get
to
paid
address
is
now.
flawed
Yeah.
because we get paid based on hours, which implies that the harder or longer it takes to make something, the more value it has. But in a world where the job is to win the news cycle, sometimes for 72 hours, it may not be hard or laborious to think up an amazing tweet or you know, an activation that dominates the airways, or a collaboration that brings two things together, or like Oreo, a dunk in the dark. That doesn't take hours. Those some of those greatest ideas were made in moments,
Right.
but they're unfortunately then they're valued as less of value, even though in today's world the most talked about brands grow faster. So it doesn't mean that a 6-minute movie is going to generate more conversation than a tweet.
Right.
But yet they pay us more to make a 6-minute movie than they pay us to make a tweet. And they should pay us based on impact, not necessarily based on hours.
Such
It
interesting.
would be great to figure that out. It's hard. It's hard to figure it out. It's not easy.
Yeah, but you touched upon something that is so important. The way we get paid is so archaic
It
in
is.
advertising, and it's not matching like the speed we're moving at. And I
Mhm.
do think that if we do not address this now in the next few years, like it's gonna be probably too late to be
Yeah,
addressed. And
we'll lose good talent. We'll lose
exactly,
good talent because they'll go to the Googles and the
absolutely.
whatever the next social platform is. We're already seeing a lot of great talent go to TikTok and go to Snapchat and go to Spotify. And whether or not those platforms stay, you know, who knows? I mean, Vine, lots of them have started and stopped, but we don't want to lose the creative thinkers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, last question.
Okay.
All our guests, there is a question that we love to ask. If you were to name a wind that blows your sail, what would the name be?
Name a wind that blows my sail.
Yeah.
Um, you know, sometimes you get something stuck in your head and you can't
Right.
get rid of it. Right now, the only thing that comes to mind is The Rock, because I'm literally staring. Here, hold on. Stay right here.
Fuck.
So for Christmas,
Right.
I ordered quarantine buddies for
Wow.
everyone in my family because we were stuck in the house, and The Rock is my quarantine buddy. And I like to say he blows my sail, but no, I would say I would name a wind spunk.
Spunk. Okay.
Spunk, like energy, momentum,
Right.
a sense of yeah, just energy and impact. And I think a spunky wind would be something that stirs up other things around itself and creates a lot of energy and momentum.
That's awesome. Hey, look, I have to say, to cross the ocean was amazing and fascinating. And like,
Thank you. And I have to say, really super thoughtful questions. And so thank you for taking as much or more time in this investment of our time together as I would. I mean, as the person answering the questions, it's very rare. And so thank you.
so much. Thank you. And I wish all the best to you or your company, your family, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.